Maybe you're not tired. It's just that your soul has grown weary of carrying a life that isn't your own. You are sharper than the room expects. You see the strings they pretend are invisible. You wake up alone inside a city that talks but never listens. The apartment is quiet, the phone lights up with messages that sound small, and you carry a hush inside you that feels ancient and slightly embarrassed, as if your mind knows things your neighbors have agreed to ignore. Overthinking isn't a flaw, it's a kind of radar. Loneliness isn't failure, it's a symptom. You move through fluorescent offices, polite small talk, curated dinners, and everywhere there is an unspoken transaction. Time for money, attention for a sliver of belonging. You feel more of it than they do. The subtle depletion that happens when your interior life is richer than the life you're permitted to live. You want something truer, but even your desires have been arranged into neat, purchasable packages. Notice this in yourself. The ache when another weekend feels like a borrowed copy of someone else's joy. Most people name this pressure stress or busyness. They call it hustle or the modern condition or even a stage of life. But there is a quieter, older word that maps the same landscape: slavery. Not the chains of history, yet not entirely divorced from them either. Dostoyevsky walked cities not unlike ours and heard the same low hum, the hum of people selling themselves not always for gold but for certainty, safety, a role. He saw how fear of freedom can become a voluntary servitude, how people will choose bondage if the alternative is the dizzying terror of making meaning alone. You don't have to be physically shackled to be a slave. Your beliefs, your habits, your small daily compromises, these can be chains. They wrap around your attention, your heart, your very idea of who you might become. Dostoyevsky's characters often barter their souls in exchange for relief. They flee the abyss of choice by anchoring themselves to a master, a system, a creed. You might not have a tyrant with a flag, but you have a regiment of tiny masters. Approval, routine, the curated image you uphold on screens. These masters whisper safety. They say, stay predictable, danger lies outside these lanes. And so you comply. You comply and call it acceptance. You follow the popular narratives because they save you from the unmooring that true freedom demands. This is subtle. It is seductive. What does that feel like inwardly? Psychologically, it looks like a divided self. On one side there is a raw, impatient awareness. You see the hollowness of certain rituals, the way conversations orbit around consumption, how praise is currency disguised as love. On the other side there is the conservator, the part of you that hoards comfort, that prefers a known emptiness to an unknown fullness. You might call that conservator your practical self. It says, keep your job, keep your friendships, keep smiling. At least your life will be measurable, presentable, explainable. The clash between these parts fractures you into a secret loneliness. You feel like an imposter in rooms you once dreamed would fit you. This fracture explains the restless nights, the uncanny shame, the sharp resentments that arrive in the middle of the night, and the quiet relief when someone asks you to simply fit a box. Dostoyevsky understood the moral psychology of this divide as an existential theft. People do not merely lose goods under a thief's hand, they lose the authority to govern themselves. In his view, when you outsource your moral direction to convenience or consensus, you give away a piece of your soul. He watched how men and women traded the labor of thinking for the ease of following. He saw thoughtless obedience produce monstrous normalcies, apathy grown into structures, pity replaced by spectacle, compassion converted into checklist virtue. The philosopher in you recoils. The part of you that has always sensed injustice nods quietly. You have seen the same. The slow erosion where questions become suspicious and obedience masquerades as civility. You often ask yourself, why do I feel different? Why does the world seem painted over? There is a psychological explanation that is almost cruelly simple. Humans are pattern-seeking machines. When you deviate from the pattern, when your inner logic does not align with the crowd, your brain flags danger. Social animals survive by sinking. That sinking creates ease, and ease becomes habit. Habits like habits beget institutions. Institutions provide identity. Identity reduces cognitive load. So you are rewarded by peers, by metrics, by algorithms for repeating what works. The reward system trains you. The more you conform, the better you are at surviving socially. The system calls that maturity. Your nervous system starts to prefer small agreements over the labor of radical self-questioning. This is how invisible chains are forged, through the habitual seeking of short-term social safety that compounds into existential stasis. Now the dark realization: the system does not need your wholesale compliance to control you. It only needs you to agree to 1,000 small forgettable deals. A like here, a nod there, a purchase under a spotlight. Each tiny concession is a link. You keep thinking you'll snap it all at once. Quit the job, end the relationship, move cities. But most people who call themselves rebels merely exchange one set of masters for another. The modern slave is skilled at improvising freedom inside a prescribed cage. You reorganize your walls and call it emancipation. Dostoyevsky watched this tendency, the human genius for rationalizing its own captivity. You are not immune. Notice this in yourself. The pride you take in small acts of defiance that ultimately confirm your belonging to the same system. There is a peculiar kind of loneliness that springs from seeing these structures while living inside them. You may speak about them and be labeled dramatic, or dystopian, or melancholic. The reaction you get tells you more than the words they say. Most people will smile, then look away because confronting the chains requires courage they haven't budgeted. That look away is how you learn to keep quiet. That look away is how silence becomes the currency of survival. It isolates you. It also sharpens you. Paradoxically, the pain of being awake in a mostly sleeping world is what hones your perception until you can read the subtlest exchanges. How gratitude is used as social glue. How ambition is praised only when it remains within acceptable lanes. How vulnerability is framed as risk until it's sanitized into marketable authenticity. You begin to understand the grammar of the game. That understanding is dangerous because knowledge tends to extract a toll. You become unmoored from trivial comforts, unwilling to pretend you belong when you don't. Dostoyevsky's psychology offers another cruel gift. He believed that suffering is a school, not because suffering is noble, but because it strips away illusions. Through suffering, one faces the naked self, and that encounter is the raw material for moral agency. You might resist that idea because suffering is painful and unpredictable. But consider the inverse. A life cushioned by convenience offers fewer chances to encounter the self as it truly is. Convenience anesthetizes. You have felt that, a faint numbness, a blunting of passion, a soft erosion of the taste for truth. You mistake comfort for victory. Dostoyevsky would ask, what will your complacency become when calamity arrives? Will you possess the moral resource to meet it, or will you be someone who once had opinions and now has habits? You deserve to hear this plainly. Being more aware than most won't save you. Awareness without change can become its own prison. The intellect trapped under a pile of insight with no action to free it. It's a peculiar cruelty. You can see the ropes and still be unable to untie them because the untying requires vulnerability, cost, and the shame of admitting you had consented to small violences against yourself. You might be waiting for a dramatic sign, a thunderbolt that legitimizes your rebellion. But the signs are quiet. The real signs are in the small rebellions. Leaving a conversation that consumes you, refusing a task that sells your time for someone else's profit, telling the truth you are ashamed to speak. These are the slow dissolutions of a slave's bonds. Don't rush to answer this question. Which small concession are you ready to stop making? You are not a tragic figure by default. You are an agent trapped by seductive logistics and sanctioned myths. The myth that work defines worth. The myth that popularity equals meaning. The myth that safety is the same as flourishing. Each myth is a contract you didn't explicitly sign. Take a moment to inventory them privately. Notice this in yourself. The phrases you repeat to justify choices you wish you hadn't made. Notice the times you muted your discomfort because it was socially inconvenient. This inventory is not punishment. It is reconnaissance. It reveals where the chains are tightest, the habits that literally keep you from stepping into the life you would choose if you had no shame. Dostoyevsky gives you a method without prescribing a formula. He pushes toward radical interior honesty. He wants you to sit in the uncomfortable room of your own contradictions and refuse to leave until you can name them. Not to wallow, but to clarify. He believed that moral autopsy, the fearless examination of one's motives, is the beginning of true freedom. It is not dramatic. It is discreet. It feels like admitting a small untruth to yourself and watching how the admission loosens the next one. This is how courage compounds. You say one small truth, then another, and eventually the architecture of deception becomes visible and collapses by its own weight. You will be tempted to think you are too damaged for this work. That is a voice of the system. It wants you to be honorable in short, safe bursts and infantilized in everything else. You may ask, what will you get if you do this? You won't receive a certificate of liberation. You will receive something stranger. A life that conflicts with mass expectations and therefore will often feel lonely. You will find yourself in fewer predictably pleasant rooms. People will misread you as arrogant or ungrateful. There will be days of real doubt. But you will also gain a rarer currency, the sovereignty of choosing your compromises consciously. Imagine owning every concession you make, not being baited into them by fear or convenience, but agreeing with eyes open. That ownership is what Dostoyevsky meant by dignity. It is small, stubborn, and unspectacular. It is quiet, like a lamp lit in a room where everyone else keeps their blinds tightly shut. To be awake is not to be better than others. It is to be harder on yourself in a way that is tender, not cruel. You can be aware and still be compassionate with the parts of you that surrendered for survival. You can change your patterns without annihilating your past self. The point is not purity, the point is presence. The point is the hard, daily willingness to notice the contracts you are offered and decide deliberately whether to sign them. Notice this in yourself, your capacity to choose differently in small, meaningful ways. That's where revolution quietly begins. As this realization settles, an identity shift will form, not a flashy viral transformation, but an interior realignment. You begin to introduce new verbs into your life: refuse, choose, risk, clarify, speak. These verbs feel like small insurrections at first, almost comically modest compared to the systems you live inside, and yet they change everything. Saying no to a meeting that drains you is a tiny earthquake. Refusing to post for the sake of engagement is a small act of sovereignty. Telling a hard truth to a friend is a personal treaty with honesty. These acts accumulate like small deposits into an account of moral independence. It is not only what you resist that matters, it is what you preserve. Your attention, your integrity, your capacity to wonder without distraction. The last dark gift Dostoyevsky offers. Freedom and loneliness are siblings. When you are awake, many comforts will fall away. People rely on shared illusions because they smooth life. When you step out of that smoothing, you may walk alone for some stretch. That loneliness is not a punishment but a clearing. It is where you can hear your own voice, unamplified by consensus. In that clearing, a question will find you. A question that has haunted those who noticed the strings since before you. If you could not be defined by what others expect of you, what would you become? Don't rush to answer this question. Let it sit like a patient fire. Let it sear away small dishonesty and refill you with a hunger that is not merely personal but precisely human. You are not here to be comforted by platitudes. You are here to be recognized by a truth that is inconvenient. Modern slavery is often voluntary and freedom is rarely loud. The work is tedious and relentless. It is asking yourself the same honest question in new ways every morning. What am I buying with my time today? What story am I consenting to tell? What small kindness am I withholding from myself because it is inconvenient? These questions are ordinary gates. Walk through them even if you feel silly, even if you fail, even if you must ask forgiveness 100 times. Freedom is a practice, not an event. There will be nights when you feel foolish, when you think you imagined a conspiracy and everyone else is right to laugh. Those nights test your mettle. Return to the small evidence, The conversations you could not stomach, the tasks that made you hollow, the moments of shame you smoothed over. These are the compass points. Trust them. Build a modest covenant with yourself. One small honest act per week. Do not promise heroics, promise constancy. Let the covenant be the scaffolding for a different life, one that does not require spectacle to be true. In the end, Dostoyevsky whispers a final, uncomfortable solace. To live honestly is terrifying, and to live dishonestly is worse. You don't have to become a martyr for truth. You merely have to commit to noticing the trades you make and, when possible, choosing them with clarity. Notice this in yourself now. What small concession will you refuse tomorrow? What truth will you speak, even if only to your own notebook? The question is not moral perfection. It is the slow, stubborn practice of choosing you again and again. You will remain a part of the world that comforts itself with safety and silence. You will still go to work, you will still keep certain promises, you will still enjoy easy pleasures. But beneath those habits, there will be a growing refusal to be defined by them. A private, unglamorous authority will grow in you, a capacity to reject a life that is offered because it is easy, and to accept the life that is chosen because it is true. That is your subtle revolt. That is your awakening. So notice this in yourself. When the quiet moment arrives, when the city exhales and the screen goes dark, what question rises in you? Hold it. Don't rush to answer. Let it shape the small decisions that follow.